Hello, welcome to Gardener's World, and welcome to the cottage garden, which for the next month or so is effectively the rose garden. Now, they need no work at all other than deadheading regularly to keep them going, but this is their hour when they shine and we just bask in that glory. However, there are other things to do, because these roses will have finished their main display by the middle of July. And at that point, you don't just want an empty garden. You need other things coming through. And to do that, you need to have plants ready, and also you need space to put them in. Now, luckily, I can create space because we have a whole raft of forget-me-nots, myosotis, which looked great underneath the tulips and were at their best then, and now are starting to fade. Now, myosotis is a biennial. Biennials set their seed and then germinate and make small plants in the first season, so from now till October, and then the next spring they grow and flower, and so the cycle goes again. So they cover 2 seasons. And you can see now these are starting. If I just take off a bit there, we've still got some flowers on the end, but all the lower flowers are turning to seed heads. And there comes a point with forget-me-nots when it's more seed than flower, and they just don't look very good. And I've learned you have to be quite ruthless about that. So if you just take them like this and pull, they come out beautifully. And it creates planting space. Now, what you will find in the process is that you acquire forget-me-not trousers. There we are, because this is how they spread. The seeds have got little barbs on them, and they stick to the fur of animals, and they move around and then wipe them off, and they get knocked off, and the plants spread. I've done this before when I am bobbled with myosotis seeds, just completely covered in them. And they're actually, well, they're sort of quite annoying, really. But that's a brilliant piece of evolution. Right. I'm going to do a little bit more clearing. Now, this is a dahlia called Hillcrest Royal, and it's a great big pink cactus-flowered dahlia. And you can see we do bright pink in this part of the garden. It is very much the dominant colour in the cottage garden, and I think this will serve well. So let's take that out, gently ease it out the pot. This has been kept in a cold frame for the last few weeks. You can see a really nice root system on that. That is ready to go. Of course, if this was sandy soil and we were 100 miles further south, I wouldn't dig this up. I'd leave it in the ground over winter. And with climate change, although our winters are wet, they're very mild, and it would almost certainly survive. However, it's very wet here in winter and gets quite cold, and that combination of wet and cold is hopeless. That can go in there, like that. Over the course of the next week or two, as I make spaces, I will add into the cottage garden, and what I hope that means is as the rose is going over, rather than the sense of a party finished with a detritus on the floor, there'll be just new growth coming up through. The one thing I would say is whatever you plant at this time of year, it doesn't matter if it's the smallest annual or a shrub, if need be, give it a good soak. I'll be adding a variety of plants, but there's one plant over the years that I've learned it's no point in adding because it just hates it in here, even though it would look wonderful, and those are bearded irises. I think they're beautiful, but they really don't like our heavy, wet clay. However, Ashley Edwards has been to a garden where they do grow them, and they grow them in style.
It's not every day that you get the chance to walk in a garden with as much romance and mystique attached to it as this one. In fact, some might say I'm stepping on hallowed ground.
It's definitely one of the most influential gardens in the UK, but what makes it so extraordinary right now is that it's both brand new, yet unmistakably deeply old. Because after decades of neglect, Benton End is being reimagined, not as it was, but as it might have become.
Benton End in Suffolk is where celebrated artist Cedric Morris established the East Anglian School of Painting and Drawing in 1939, which soon drew a range of influential writers and artists. But its enduring reputation lies in the garden Cedric Morris created here.
Cedric's vision for the garden was radical. It was unstructured, naturalistic, it had never been seen before. Rare plants collected from his travels weave themselves amongst his own bearded irises, bred with an artist's eye for colour.
Cedric's garden became a beacon for a new generation of horticulturists, including Bev Chatto. But following his death in 1982, the garden became lost. So when the garden was gifted to the Garden Museum in 2021, a project came about for its restoration, and with the help of designer Sarah Price, head gardener James Horner set about its revival. And the first thing James did was to watch and wait as bulbs which Cedric planted many decades ago began to show themselves.
We actually refer to them as Cedric's ghosts.
Oh, I love that.
So they really start, the season of those starts in January with lots of snowdrops.
And these amazing asphodels.
Yeah, sure, they're really showing themselves
They're
for
incredible.
you today.
They're like candelabras, aren't they, the way they stand up?
Yeah, amazing foliage as well, like blue glaucous foliage. They're Asphodelus albus, so it's quite a prolific bulb across the Mediterranean.
Okay, so that's probably where he collected it from, do you think?
I reckon so, yeah. He's frequently travelling down to the Iberian Peninsula and painting at the same time.
So how closely linked was the garden with the art school?
Really closely linked in that, definitely for Cedric, there was a real fusion between what he was growing in the garden and what he was painting. But also art students would be out in the garden propping up their easels and studying plants and painting.
The ghost bulbs set the scene, but the absolute focal point here in the Walk Garden are these, the Benton End irises. Cedric bred over 90 varieties of iris, and his artistic vision meant the Benton End irises became revered for a delicacy and range of colours never seen before.
Now, I've seen Benton irises in other gardens and available at nurseries, but to see them here in the place they originated is so special. And this one is called Susan, and look at this. I love the venation on the petals. They're almost like tiger stripes. It's got this golden colour with this really nice biscuity caramel sort of hint to it. You could just eat them. Cedric often named his irises after places he liked to visit or people he came in contact with and friends. And this one is actually named after his solicitor's wife. And then over there we have Olive, and Olive is named after Olive Murrell, and she was an iris breeder herself. And it wasn't just people that Cedric named his irises after. He was known to have a menagerie of animals, and this is called Menace, Benton Menace, after his cat Menace. You can see here this really dark purple colour. I love the dark irises, and it has this yellow venation and a bit of a yellow beard on the fall as well. It's such an opulent sort of iris.
After Cedric's death, many of his irises became lost, but over the decades have been tracked down and returned to Benton End, drawing a horticultural thread from past to present. And now James is looking to pull that story into the future by breeding new iris cultivars himself.
So what we do here, actually, is we're looking to take the male part of the flower. This is Benton Susan, and we're actually going to have to, we're looking for this filament, which has got the anther and the pollen on it.
Okay.
There's 3 on each flower.
The next step is to take the pollen-covered anthers to the nursery bed, choose a flower, and transfer the pollen onto the female parts.
Right, James, which one are we going to go for?
Well, we need a flower which is open today, so I think Deirdre might be the one to go for this one here.
This one?
So the first thing we're going to do is actually take off all the petals.
Okay.
We're actually going to take off the pollen from this plant as well, so that it has no chance of using that to fertilise itself.
So by removing these anthers, we know that this Susan is going to pollinate this Deirdre.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very precise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Next, James brushes the pollen from Susan onto the stigmatic lip of Deirdre.
Do you know, that's reminding me of like using a paintbrush.
Yeah, it's very
Very
much
Cedric
exactly,
Morris.
literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
Amazing.
will draw down the ovary on the flower is down here, so that is where the seed will develop. It takes about 3 years for the seedling to build up a big enough rhizome so that it can actually produce a flower.
Oh, wow. I'll come and check back in 3 years then.
I was expecting you to come and sow it maybe too.
Oh yeah, I could try, yeah.
At the front of the house, there are more Cedric treasures, like his Sicilian sweet pea and a simply gorgeous poppy.
Cedric spotted this colour variation out in the fields and decided he wanted to bring it back here to the garden. So he collected the seeds, brought it back and grew it, and then he would select the seedlings that came up with this lovely pale lilac colour, and it's now known as the mother of pearl poppy. And now James is carrying on Cedric's work by selecting the best of these mother of pearl poppies and actually removing the red ones that he finds popping up in the garden.
Benton End and its signature plants had a huge influence on British gardening. And with both garden and art school now being revived, the unique gardening spirit has been rekindled.
And what's really evocative about this area is that you can see from old photographs that Cedric laid out his beds in a flowing pattern which meandered around the space.
This had the added benefit that students could place their easels and get a surround view of the plants.
And James has honoured that style in his beds, and soon new students will be turning up with their easels, a bit like those ghost bulbs, bridging the present and the past.
Now, talking about the passing of time, other than the fact the very few bearded irises we do have in special raised beds, this honeysuckle was planted 15 to 20 years ago, ages ago, on the other side of the wall, growing in shade and scrambling up and not doing very much. And then this year, for the first time, it's decided to come over the wall from the other side, has found the sunlight and is flowering. And not just flowering, but flowering joyfully, gorgeously. It's Lonicera tellmaniana, and these wonderful egg yolk yellow flowers, fabulous fragrance. It looks really good sprawling amongst the fig and against the wall. So it shows if you have patience, it will come good in time. The carrots that I sowed the other day have all germinated and are coming up in the tin. I might sow some more in a raised bed later, but it's good to see them in action. Now, I've got some tomatoes, which actually I was going to leave for a week or two, but given the weather we've had, it's perfectly good to plant tomatoes outside. The key thing with growing tomatoes is a constant temperature. A steady heat with warm nights is really what you're after, so let's hope that these have that. This is a variety called Gardener's Delight. So, the planting of them is the same indoors, outdoors, in a container, whatever. You need to make a hole that is quite deep. Let's go down like that. You want to plant it at least up to the bottom leaf. And in fact, you could go higher than that. And what that will do, it won't hurt having the leaf underground, but it will encourage roots to grow from the stem. And that will enable it to feed better and also to anchor it, which with a cordon, which will grow tall and heavy, is quite important. Pop that in, backfill around it. And I'm getting it in really firmly. And in general, it's better to plant them a bit closer together than further apart. If you give them lots of space, you'll get a bigger tomato plant, but not necessarily more tomatoes. These might seem overkill, and they are a bit, but I've got them. And the bamboos I've got are not really strong enough to hold a cordon tomato fully ripe, fully laden with fruit. And these plants will grow 6 foot tall and hopefully be heavy with fruit. So they do need support. Ned, why don't you go in the shade? It's hot. Hot dog. These are hazel, which I can't bang in, but will do the job nicely. Now I've got space in between the plants, not much, and not for terribly long, because these will grow and cast shade. But I've got some lettuce, so I'm going to infill the gaps with lettuce. I will harvest those in about 4 or 5 weeks' time before they and the tomatoes begin to clash in any way. So we use the space, that's the thing, use up as much of the space as we can. These are cos lettuces. I love cos because they have a slight crispiness to them. These are big summer lettuce and they're really good. These were sown about 8 weeks ago. They'll be ready to harvest in about 4 weeks' time, but to be honest, you can harvest them small, you can let them grow big. They will make a big lettuce. And if you keep cutting them back, they will regrow. So we'll pop these, just one in between each of the tomatoes. I never sow lettuce direct anymore. I always sow them in seed trays and prick them out. The main reason being that it avoids slug damage. And they're particularly vulnerable when they're just emerging from the ground, and that's caviar to your average slug. Now what you have to do is water, because lettuce, in the sort of heat we've got today, need watering daily. We're going to Brighton now to visit a couple who, in the transformation of their house, also remade their garden to fit their lifestyle.
We're in an urban environment, so to be able to walk into this garden and have this abundance is just an absolute privilege.
I love just that sense of caring for it, to create something that's beautiful, productive, and that brings joy to both of us. I'm Steve.
I'm John. He's head gardener.
He's head of tomatoes.
And welcome to our garden in Brighton. In 2020, we were able to extend the house and also rework the garden. The basic thinking behind it was that we would take the garden back to bare soil, rethink it, allow us to enjoy it, but allow the garden to have a real proper relationship with the house. There are views from inside the house and through the house. There's a lot of glazing. It was just really important that the relationship between the inside and the outside was removed as much as possible so that we could double our living room every summer by being able to walk outside and just enjoy what we had there.
When we redesigned the garden, we wanted to make sure there was as much space for planting as possible, while also leaving the right amount of space for sitting areas, dining areas, etc. So we set out to create beds that would allow us to define the garden, to actually delineate those spaces. And really, we've kept it a relatively narrow palette of plants. There are certain plants which are repeated, like the thalictrum, like the perovskias, and it allows us to create planting we love, but that also serve a purpose.
We've got really lovely verticals in these beds, which counteract the horizontal of the fence and the wall really well. What they do is give you a green wall, so wherever you are, you're surrounded by lovely plants. I mean, here we've got some dahlias, which are doing really terrific things. Earlier in the year, this is full of tulips and really mad colour. And we've got a lovely agapanthus here, which is doing really sterling work, really, really bright and sharp. Wherever we are in the garden, we're surrounded by planting. This garden down the side of the house has to be planted in a different way from the rest of the garden. We've got the big black cladding on the side from our extension, which means we plant glaucous plants against it because they really shine. It allows us also to put in some really bright rudbeckias. We've got hydrangeas which look really bright as well, and they sing out in the shadow. And behind us, we've got a rhododendron, which is a reed, and this is a perennial. It's grown nearly as tall as the house, and this is just this season's growth. It will grow taller, and we cut it back down every February. You can have really big plants in small gardens. They do great things. This one works as a gateway through to the garden at the back of the house.
When we came to design the garden, it was really important to me that we had water, and not just a pond, but moving water. One of the things this rill and the moving water does is give us privacy, because it creates white noise. And it means if we're out in our garden, other people in their gardens around us, we can't hear them and they can't hear us. It's just enough to break up that sound and give us the privacy that can be so hard to find in urban areas.
We have a small productive area in the garden. I really enjoy cooking and Steve really enjoys growing. And it was important to be productive, to actually enjoy things that we grow. We use the space really carefully. We really have to think about what we're planting. It's things we like to eat. And if they look great as well, that's brilliant. At the moment, we've got beetroot all along here and some under the courgettes. Those look terrific. We've got a range of salad leaves. We'll succession plant these as we eat them. We've got some mustard red snapper, so that's going to be a really nice, sharp, tangy addition to salads. And one of my favourite things is Welsh onions. What I do is cut a leaf, chop it up and use it like a much more strongly flavoured chive. They're really nice in flatbreads and salads. In the greenhouse, I'm growing the heritage tomatoes, a range of colours and shapes and really different tastes and textures. I think you can absolutely tell a homegrown tomato. This year has been so very, very hot, it's been difficult to keep them hydrated, but it's still a great crop and I expect to be picking them until November. And then in November, we move in our aeoniums and our succulents, so they overwinter in the greenhouse. And that's another example of using our limited space really, really carefully. Things have repeated uses. I think it's really important in a small garden that you grow what you love. If you like roses, grow roses. If you like grasses, grow grasses. You're going to be in it, you're going to be close to it, you're going to be spending a lot of time in it. Make it what you want.
The garden, to me, is part of our home. It's as simple as that.
It's a space to think, it's a space to just sit and be. It's a space to garden and grow things and watch plants unfolding and unfurling really, really close to you.
It's a real privilege to be able to step out and enjoy our own little slice of, let's say, horticultural heaven.
God. What that exemplifies for me is that you have to make the garden that works for you. The question I always ask people when they're setting out on a garden is, what do you want to use it for? It could be very basic. Somewhere for the kids to kick a football around, or to grow some vegetables, or just sit in the evening and enjoy a drink. But that will shape how you plant it. And that garden has been created around a lifestyle, and rather than the lifestyle being based around the garden. The 4 large pots in each corner of this central square of the jewel garden are probably the most important single display that we do every year. It's quite a performance. They hold the jewel garden together. They set the tone. They're very much flamboyant set pieces. And every year I change them or reconsider them and use what I have. And this year I've decided to use gingers in the center, then have cosmos and nasturtiums. Nasturtiums, of course, which spilling out. I've grown them from seed, the cosmos from seed, and the gingers I've had. So I haven't had to buy any plants at all. The gingers, however, are fairly big, very heavy, and it's not a bad idea to consider dividing them if need be. As I say, these are heavy, so I'm going to grunt. There we go. This is Hedychium Assam orange, and as the name suggests, it has these orange flowers produced in late summer, very often as late as September, but can go on into the first frosts. You can see here there's an offshoot which I think I can reduce. If I take that out, I can pot that up, grow a new plant, and this makes a slightly more compact plant for going for the center of the pot. Now, I did bring with me a saw. If you've got a sharp knife, a bread knife, a saw, this is an old pruning saw. So if I'm going to cut across there, now that gives me a new plant. If I pot this up, put it in the greenhouse, give it lots of heat, plenty of water, plenty of food, that will grow very strongly, will bulk out, and then next year make a new plant. That's better. So now, rather than infilling with good soil around the roots of the ginger, I'm going to infill with this, not so much bad soil, but you can hear it. Look how gritty that is. And that's the soil that had tulips in all winter, which is perfect for nasturtiums and to a certain extent cosmos. Cosmos will flower much better in poor soil than good soil. Two different types of nasturtium. There's this orange one. Now this is a variety called Empress of India. So we've got the orange and the red. And the orange will pick up the orange flowers of the ginger. And the red, the ruby red, will add fire. This is Cosmos Dazzler, one of my favourite cosmoses, because you have this sort of magenta colour. These cosmos have been grown in plugs, they've been in a cold frame, so they've all grown up tall and strong. But actually, to get maximum flowers and to get nice healthy plants, it's not a bad idea to pinch them out. Now, when you speak about pinching out, it implies with your fingers you just take out the tops. But in this case, and in fact, any kind of pruning, whether you're using your fingers or a chainsaw, always go back to something. And in this case, we go down the stem, down, 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 till we reach a pair of leaves. And that's where to go. And it's too strong to use my fingers, so just use a knife and cut like that. And what that will do is encourage nice, strong, bushy growth, lots of side shoots means lots of flowers. Rather like the ginger, cosmos, I think, are at their best September, early October. These are long-term, late summer, early autumn plants. So it doesn't matter if you take out some of the flowering and delay it by a week or two. You're going to more than make up for that at the back end. I will water this, and it is worth pointing out that if you're putting together a big display at this time of year, it is going to need quite a lot of water. So if you have problems either with water shortages or you can't collect very much water, think very carefully, A, whether you need a big pot at all, and B, what you're going to plant. Some plants need a lot more water than others. Gingers do need watering at least once a week, a good soak, and if it's warm, twice a week. So just bear that in mind. Right, while I water this and then carry on with the other pots, we're going to join Sue, who has been visiting gardens in Penarth.
One of the life-enhancing things about being a gardener is fellow enthusiasts, keen to share their knowledge. And a great opportunity to do this is to visit an open garden. I'm in Penarth, south of Cardiff, where a group of gardeners are sharing their private gardens for charity. First, I'm travelling to a garden built over decades by John and Judith. And I spoke to Judith about some of the unique issues they've had to overcome. So Judith, tell me a bit about this lovely garden.
Well, I've lived here for 43 years now, and before that my great-grandmother lived here since 1912.
Oh, so it's been in the family an awfully long time.
It has.
What was it like when you inherited it?
It was awful because she'd been in hospital for several years, so the bramble had taken over. There was a big cement works right at the top here, and it used to pour down lots of cement dust, which was alkaline.
And how did that affect your planting when you first started?
Oh, well, we didn't know anything about soil when we first started 43 years ago, so we just put in plants we liked.
What were they?
They were the acers, anything that is acid loving, we love.
Excellent.
You know.
So all died, I take it.
It all died. It all died. So over the years we sort of gained a little bit more knowledge, but over the years also the soil is changing because it hasn't got that alkaline dust coming over anymore.
And you've got all the decomposition of your garden and all the mulching and
exactly.
Yeah. And so now you've got a bit more choice and freedom to plant.
We have.
Yeah. And you're opening to the public, and how do you find that experience?
Oh, it's wonderful. We can have 300-400 people through the gates, and it is a lovely experience. It's exhausting, but it's such a wonderful experience because different gardeners, you know, come with different ideas. It's lovely meeting people who enjoy gardening.
Of course, you never know what the weather's going to do. But rain or shine, next up is Dean and his slightly damp tropical garden. Hello, Dean. It's wonderful in wet Wales, and we're almost in a tropical rainforest. What inspired you to garden like this?
Well, other than this weather, what inspired me was the sunny weather of Corfu, where they have obviously a lot of tropical plants, canna lilies, bananas, and that's what inspired me to start on this garden.
What would be your favourite plant in the garden?
Currently is the Echium pelinidi, which is towering above you. That's a biannual or a triannual. That flowers this year and then it dies.
I'm very jealous because I've tried to grow this 3 times and I get to my second year and then the frosts take it out.
Yeah, well, there's a certain amount of luck. It's a matter of finding the right pot and getting them through winter because they are semi-hardy. So I tend to protect mine with fleece bags only during the freezing periods and also grow 4 or 5 or 6 to make sure that I've covered for any loss.
Well, I think you've made a wonderful enclosed space here and it's lush and beautiful. Well done.
Thank you very much. I apologise for the weather, that's all.
Well, we both live in Wales. We know the reality.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
while this is predominantly a lush green garden, Dean's been very clever in his use of maroon at every level. And down here we've got this beautiful two-tone oxalis, which looks a bit like a four-leaf clover. And you need lots of lush planting in a tropical style garden. I've seen this a lot at the shows. It seems to be having its moment, and I can see why. As the rain clears, I'm heading down the road to see how one couple is dealing with a challenge that I faced in my own garden. I'm in Gary and Claire's garden, and it's a relatively new garden, and it was steeply sloping, and I know what that's like. And I can see from this point a garden room, and normally you can't see the roof, but they've made it a feature so it looks lovely. Now, having a sloping garden is not very easy to live with, so Gary dug out 50 tons of soil and created 3 different levels. And over here there's more prairie style planting and a lovely patio area. We've got some lovely grey slate running throughout the garden, and that's complemented by the planting. Silver grey foliage, white plants, purple and blues. It really is rather lush. The final person that I want to speak with is Anne, without whom none of this would have happened. Anne has been running Penarth Open Garden Trail for nearly 30 years, and in her own garden there's lots of individual gardens just waiting to be explored. This area feels like a lovely meditative space. Anne's lifted the canopy of lots of the trees, giving room for people underneath. And I like the way that Anne's used every available space. She's even got a hanging basket in a tree, and I've never seen that before. And then I arrive into this lovely open lawn area. And behind me is this tapestry of foliage, and it shows how many different plants you can get in an area. I really want to try this at home. I wanted to ask Anne what the last 30 years have been like. Anne, what got you started to open your garden to the public?
Well, I saw in a magazine it suggested that if you had a garden, great or small, open it for other people to enjoy. And I looked at my husband and I said, we're going to do this. And he said, when? Oh, I said, in 3 weeks. He didn't demur, he agreed. And we did. And of course, we opened up and it was a terrific success. Far, far more than I would ever anticipated. Hence, 29 years later, it's still happening. I always said, growing up, if ever I have a house of my own, I'm going to have a garden that everybody can come to. And I think over the years, we've done that. All these people have just loved coming, and to have shared something like that is just very, very special. Very special.
And thank you for sharing it with me.
Thank you, Sue.
There is something about very local garden schemes that actually manage to combine the sense of real individuality and sometimes quirkiness and humour along with a sense of social spirit. It's a brilliant thing to do. Now, there's a rose here which I planted maybe 15 years ago, scrambling over the shed and up into the tree. It looks like a rambling rose, but in fact is a climber, one of the first climbers to flower. It's called Cecile Brunner. And it's got these small, multi-petaled pink flowers. And it's so profuse, so exuberant in the way it flowers, and is an absolute joy. And it also looks really good from round the corner down the path, so come with me. I let it climb and fall and loop and swoop where it wants to go. You can get confused between climbers and ramblers, but there are differences. So if you look at a stem from Cecile Brunner, you'll see that all the flowers occur on side shoots. They're coming off at right angles to the stem and lead to either one or perhaps at most 2 or 3 flowers. And although they're small and they're multi-petaled, they are growing in that way, which is very typical of a climbing rose. And the whole point about that is it flowers on new growth. So anything that was there in January would not bear any flowers. Whereas a rambler, and I've got ramblers all around me, produce their flowers on the previous year's growth in a great mass of buds. So you can see that there are sprays of buds, lots and lots, maybe 20, 30, 40 on one shoot, just waiting to open. And this will happen in the next day or two. It is easy to get them confused. And quite frankly, at this time of year, when there's so much beauty about, you shouldn't care too much. From the very beginning, I have grown Tulbagia here in the Paradise Garden. And if you're not familiar with it, Tulbagia is a fantastic plant. Now, Tulbagia is one of the sort of less known but so dependable plants. It's basically a flowering onion. It's got a sort of garlicky tang to it. But I've planted it in baking hot Greek gardens and in Scottish gardens, and it's thrived in both. It needs reasonably good drainage and sunshine for at least half the day. But if you give it that, it will grow and flower with lovely sort of pale, lilac-y mauve flowers from, June right through till November and beyond if it doesn't get frosted. It's relatively hardy. I never lift it. Sometimes we lose it and we have to top it up, and that's what I'm doing now. Take it out. You can see there's a good root system in there. Doesn't look like much now, but give it a week or two, and this will be up, and it'll be flowering, and it just sets the tone for this garden. There are always certain plants that are sort of key plants, half a dozen plants in any area that really shape it and define it, not just the way it looks, but the way it feels, which is a very abstract thing, but I've noticed it always works. The reason why I grow Tulbagia here is because I did add so much grit to the soil before planting, which means the drainage is good. And certainly it'd be useless to try and grow, say, succulents or tropical plants in our heavy clay and our very, very wet winters. However, Paul Randall, in his home in Dunstable, has managed to grow an extraordinary range of exotic succulents and tropical plants.
It can be a surprise when people walk into the back garden. There's not much indication from the front of what we've got out here. So when I moved here, it was half an acre of grassy paddocks, really, and a few mature trees. So I had a blank canvas. Holidaying in the Canaries first got me interested. I saw the huge, wonderful agaves out there, and then the aeoniums, and then I looked up at the palm trees. And I thought I can do that. The garden consists of some large structural plants, and then I've built around that some medium-sized agave plants, and then the fun bit starts with the smaller succulents in all the beds. The most popular hardy palm you see in the garden centres is Trachycarpus fortunei. But I actually prefer Trachycarpus wagnerianus. They're equally as hardy as the fortunei, but they're smaller, more compact, and they've got a stiffer leaf, more wind resistant, and they've got a lovely green to them. Much more suitable for a smaller garden. They're all over the place. So the aspect is very important. I'm lucky to have a large, long, south-facing border, and that's where most of the real tender stuff goes. So this is my long border, which mostly comes in to the greenhouse each winter, and then I plant it out again starting in mid-April. This Echeveria pink hedge has absolutely thrived this year, so I put that in a prominent position in the centre of the bed. But there are plenty of hardy plants that will survive outside. This Delosperma cooperi, the hardy ice plant, is the hardiest spreader that I have. There's another lovely spreading plant here, Aptenia, which gives myriads of small red flowers, and from a very small cutting it will spread over one season and give you more coverage than you need, really. It's more a case of cutting it back than growing it after a few weeks. I don't live in a mild area like the south coast. The secret is having a structure of hardy, large plants and then organising the rest of the garden around those. Propagating succulents couldn't be easier. The nature of their fleshy leaves means that they will produce roots from a cutting before they start to dry up. Cut it there, pop it in some moist soil to allow the roots to grow. They'll take about a week to 2 weeks to start producing little white roots. And so this is how I'm able to cover so much of my garden without great expense. So I have around 150 varieties of sempervivum here, spread over around 600 pots, and they're increasing all of the time. So as you can see, 2 becomes 10, and then I would just pull one of these off, replant it. It's already got a little bit of root on there. And within a year, that would be a nice, large individual specimen. So this year, I've tried an experiment with this Aeonium here, Aeonium arboretum. We noticed it was struggling with these very small, wizened heads, and it was throwing down roots that they were never going to reach the ground. So I've placed some pots just underneath the roots, and they found their way into the cup, and then within a few weeks the heads begin to thrive again. And now this plant, instead of dying from the top, has just carried on growing. It's over 5 foot tall. For many years I struggled with prickly pears. It's a lovely structural plant, but I kept losing them each winter. Eventually I placed one here against the south-facing wall, and the warmth of the sun, even in winter time, just radiates back off the wall, and that's good enough to keep that plant healthy now. People ask me, do I use special soils? And the answer is no. As long as it's free draining, they don't like wet roots, especially cold wet roots, then yeah, they'll just sail away and they're happy. All of the large plants, they stay outside all year round, and apart from pruning and tidying, they look after themselves. They're all hardy, survive the worst of the winters. Some of my most impressive plants are these large agaves. I just love the architectural form of their leaves. They do need a little bit more protection than the trees. I've started covering them with a very thick gauged fleece, and then I used weatherproof tubular heaters. This one's 100 watt, so they only cost 50p a night to run. Since employing these tubular heaters, I haven't lost a single agave, and so year on year they're growing bigger and bigger, and now they're reaching these incredible sizes. These agaves all went in as babies, and they've been here around 8 years. You can have great fun with succulents because they are just so easy to manage. This particular Echeveria here, sea dragon, is just so unusual. But I feel if astronauts went to outer space and came back with some plants, maybe they would come back with something looking like this. The thing I most love about this hobby is the reaction of other people when they come into the garden. That's what drives me on. People often say to me that I must be some kind of amazing gardener, but I promise you I'm not. Give me a tray of bedding plants in March and I'll have them dead by May. I was originally inspired to create an exotic garden after seeing so many incredible plants whilst on holiday. And now After 10 or so years of enjoyable work in the garden, I can say when I come out of my patio doors in the morning, I feel like I'm on holiday every day.
It's really interesting how that going on holiday seems to trigger something in so many people. They see a group of plants they've never really come across before, and it becomes something that they're deeply enthralled with. I have to say, that's not me. I like just a wider collection of plants. But I have seen rosemary wherever I go in the Mediterranean, and it's one of my favourite plants. And what I'm trying to do here is create a sort of tabletop of rosemary. And to do that, I've planted individual plants, which I took as cuttings a couple of years ago. And then I'm going to prune them back. But in pruning them back, of course, I've got material I can take for cuttings. And these are softwood cuttings. Now, softwood cutting simply means that the material is soft. If you can bend it in two without breaking it, it's a softwood cutting. The great advantage of softwood cuttings is they strike roots really quickly. The great disadvantage is they die really quickly. So basically you have to be prepared. So you need a polythene bag, you need to have everything ready, and then just cut back the tips like that, and maybe like that. And these are just the soft growing tips. Put them straight into a bag. And the reason why you put them into a bag is because they are losing moisture, and it's that will kill them. So by popping them in the bag, the respiration collects on the surface of the bag and just feeds back in. It keeps it more humid. So I'll take a few more while I'm about it. Let's go and process these, and this has to be quick. So I've got a potting mix with a lot of perlite and vermiculite added, so there'll be very good drainage. So they're ready. Now you can see we have all these leaves on here, and we don't need those because all that's going to do is lose moisture. And with young plants like this, or young growth like this, I can just pull off the leaves very easily. A dibber, and just pop it in like that. That's one done. So we'll just strip the leaves off. And you'll notice I'm going into the corners. And the reason for that is that the corners dry out less quickly because they're near the plastic of the pot. Okay, I don't want to tear that. Cut it. There we go. Water that, and then you either put it in an enclosed propagator, and that will keep the moisture in. But for most people, the easiest way to do it is simply to take a polythene bag, and if it's one with a zip, pull that tight, and that will keep them moist. If you see them wilting, then you may need to add a little bit of water, but put them somewhere light but not bright. And these, if they're going to root, will root in a week or two. They're really quick. And then you can pot them on and grow them as plants, and by next spring when you plant them out, they'll be nice, strong little plants. And the great beauty of softwood cuttings, if you do them, is there are lots. There's masses of soft growth, so you can afford to lose some. But don't be put off if they don't work first time. Get it right, and you're making plants for free. That's a good job to do at this time of year. And here are some other good jobs for you this weekend. The beet family, which includes spinach, chard and beetroot, have a tendency to bolt, that is to produce a flowering stem, in hot weather. But this can be remedied by cutting that bolting stem right down at the base of the plant. Don't just take the flowering head off, but cut it low, and that will mean that the plant can put all its energies into producing fresh new leaves. It may seem that it's getting late to sow plants from seed, but that's not the case. Nasturtiums, for example, will do very well if sown now. Put 1 seed to a plug or 2 seeds to a small pot and grow them on in a warm place to germinate and to develop into small plants. They can then be planted out and will flower right through till the first frost. Tree ferns thrive in mild, humid conditions. And when the weather is dry and hot, it often results in much smaller fronds. And this is true of many of the fern family. The answer is to water them daily when the weather is hot and dry. Direct a stream of water at the trunk rather than the ground, and then turn the attachment to a mist and water the air around them. And you'll find that tree ferns and many other ferns will thrive, whatever the weather. What is it? There are times when Ned is feeling he's not getting enough love. So he needs a bit of a cuddle. So we find somewhere and we just have a moment or two together, don't we? And then, when you've had enough, we can carry on, can't we? Come on in. Off we go. This is a big pile of spent potting compost. This is very much behind the scenes here at Longmeadow. And yet it's really important because we grow lots and lots of bulbs for spring and for summer. But obviously when the flowering is over and we have to empty the pots, we could throw it away, but instead we add it to this heap. In time, it all gets recycled, having been used once. So we really do try and waste nothing here. And I'm going to use this for potting up a few more tallbagias, and they'll love it. Obviously, everything we do behind the scenes, whether it's shoveling spent compost or working in the rain or mowing or whatever it might be, is for days like this. This is why we garden. It's heaven on a day like this. So if you have a garden, if you have access to a garden or a park, now is the time to enjoy it fully. Don't let a precious moment pass. But I'm afraid that's the end of our moments. That's it for today, but I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next time. So until then, bye-bye.